So I'm Gary. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Saturday night Mountaintop Recovery meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. So this is a working step group. And tonight we'll meet for approximately 1.5 hours without a break. And out of respect for others, we request that you refrain from cross-talking or commenting while others are sharing. And if you could just stay muted while individuals are sharing, that'd be appreciated. So you don't get any feedback or other interesting background noises. And if we like to do, we're going to open the meeting with a moment of silence to remember those of us that are still out and suffering, and follow that by the abbreviated set aside prayer. Great, thank you very much. So the set aside prayer, as I have it here, is just: God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, recovery, you, and the 12 steps, that I might have an open mind and a new experience. Amen. As we are just talking about just before we started this formally, we're going to do a quick review of the first two parts of step 11. And Jill, feel free to jump in here. But the first part was seeking through prayer and meditation. In other words, we were learning how to open the channel, and establish, for want of better words, two-way communication.
So Laura, can I just get her to pull up the first page in the little red book? We'll go back a little bit just to the opening page so everybody can actually see the wording of step 11 in front of them. And because this was news to me, that step 11 has 3 parts to it. So what Gary is recapping, if you actually, Laura, if you pull that page up, we can actually, in our little books or make notes, and see how that actual step 11. So drag it down to where the actual step, or go backwards from where we were to where the step is printed, the very beginning of step 11.
It's going to be a few pages.
Yeah. There we go. So everybody can see that on the screen now. So can see how Gary's going to break the words that are in italics at the top into 3 parts. Sorry to interrupt, Gary. I just thought that visual was helpful.
Yep. I was turning it over to you to expand on the beginning of it. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact. So establishing that two-way communication, was the first part of the step. I was going to let you talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so just to recap on what we did when we broke the first part of step 11 down. And like I said, until going through this study guide, I'd never heard of breaking step 11 down to 3 parts. And this is basically telling us that we have to design a method of communicating with our higher power. And what we're trying to do here is improve our conscious contact with God. That's part of this, right? It's telling us prayer and meditation. And then this section goes through how to prayer and meditate if you've never done it before. But pretty much everybody in here is pretty practiced at listening to meditations. So what it then said is a big key point was we can't get complacent about this. This was one of the big key points in the first part of this, is that it isn't enough to just go to church and sit there. We have to consciously improve our higher connection. So we're always trying to move to a higher version of ourselves, to be a greater spiritual being. And so there was an awful lot of points that were made in this first part about complacency. And then it says, it went into what is a prayer? That's a conversation with my higher power. And prayer is a means of thinking things through with my higher power. We had a good chat about that. And then it also talked a lot about prayers of gratitude. And that finished us. The last key point was, it's simple. Try it. In other words, this is an action. We don't just pray that we're going to pray. We actually get down on our knees and get on with it. Okay, back to you, Gary. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was just munching on a cookie here.
Lucky you.
Anyways, what I was going to say is there something I read this afternoon while I was just kind of reviewing this that really struck a chord, because it talks about, learning how to open the channel. But then it goes on later on to talk about the fact that, just like in rivers or water flow or whatever, eventually the channels start to get a bit clogged and things slow down. And in terms of this, it's letting our will kind of creep back into our thinking along the ways. And sometimes we just have to do a real reset, just shake our heads and reestablish, making sure that we've got a conscious contact with our higher power, not just making that assumption that it's always there, and I'm confident that it's, in my life that I always have that connection, but sometimes I let my own thinking kind of crowd the way, and I just have to sometimes sit back and consciously pray. Sometimes it becomes very rote. I lose track of the words and just kind of go through the routine, and sometimes you just have to shake it up a bit and just make sure you're truly connected.
Yeah, and what we're going to do at the end of this is we're going to have a little round robin and talk about our experience with prayer and meditation and how we're getting a closer conscious contact with God or with our higher power. So then we moved on to the second part last week, right?
Praying only for knowledge of his will, which in simple terms is just learning how to pray rightly. Get out of the way, the thinking that I need to pray for specifics and get back into just praying for his, for guidance and what God's will is, asking for direction and then being prepared to do the work.
Yeah, what really hit me on that one, I have to say, was it said that right from the very beginning, it's God's will for us to be sober.
And
God
happy.
doesn't want us drunk. God wants us to be sober so that we can carry out his work. And that's one of the first points. And so I wrote at the bottom of that page, my higher power wants Jill sober. Without sobriety, I can't do HP's work. So that was kind of an interesting starting point there. And then I like this definition. I don't know if you didn't hear it, this I hadn't heard before. It defined AA as a, quote, practical therapy for arresting the disease of alcoholism. And I thought that was very interesting that they kept using the word therapy. And therapy, when we looked it up, was a course of treatment and a course of healing. So that was pretty wild. And then another key point was that we have to, in order for us to know what God wants for us, we have to surrender our will to him with charitable, loving acts of service to others. We cannot live unto ourselves alone. In other words, all bets are off unless we get out of self and get into being of service to other people. So that was a pretty cool key point I got from that. And then the thing that I really enjoyed about this was, how in the big book it mentions several times that when they were talking about the disease and the doctor's opinion, and they said Freud and Silkworth were saying, well, there are those who recover, but they seem to have to undergo a psychic change. And this little book talks about that. And it says that basically my spiritual awakening, which is what we're going to get into next week, what step 12 is all about, is contingent. That means it's absolutely dependent and reliant upon me having a personality change. And I call that the God muscle. That's our HP muscle. Until I connect with my higher power, I'm stuck. And that's why in these steps that we're doing now, we're fine tuning our channel. We talked about it as being a greater connection, or like when your internet is unstable and you finally feel tuned in and the signal's really good. That's what we're working on in here. And then another key idea that they were talking about is that um, we are, to the best of our ability, gaining a knowledge of God's will by the practice of faith, honesty, and here it comes again, unselfish service. So we don't get to just, here's the bad news, is like you may not lose the desire to drink from this program, but you still have to think. And what happened for me is I learned in here I had really stinking thinking, that I had to really learn an awful lot about how to think good. And what I learned was that thinking good for me is thinking of you and thinking of the still suffering alcoholic, and then turning that into action of helping other people. So that was a pretty big key point on that. And then we talked about actions, and this was the big part of where we ended up, is that this is about action, action, and more action. It's not wise to pray for power selfishly or with resentment, envy, or self-pity in our hearts. In other words, get out of yourself. So this is just a recap of the key points. And if you want to learn this stuff, it's all in the last week's recordings, but that's a summary of those points. Back to you, Gary.
Well, actually, I was going to say that moves us on to the third part here. Oh, and sorry, just going to clarify. You were saying that we kind of look at spiritual awakening in step 12. But in step 12, all we really do is look back and acknowledge the fact that by the time we reach step 11, we're starting to make that spiritual connection. And one of our old timers in the area that Jill knows, Lance, likes to say, he likes to point out that if you've been working through these steps, you're not the same person that you were when you walked in and started these steps. If you've actually gone through step 4 and 5 and, done the prayers related to steps 6 and 7 in the preparation and, started working through your amends, you're going to have had a psychic change or a spiritual awakening, as Jill said, and step 11 is just our way of kind of formalizing that commitment and the opening the channel, and started setting ourselves up for just a constant, as she just said, course of action related to maintaining our spiritual fitness. They say that earlier on the steps, it says we can go anywhere and face anything basically based on our, as long as we're spiritually fit, contingent on our spiritual condition. And that's what, we've been working up to. And step 12, it's a guaranteed. I love that the way it starts off, just to foreshadow a bit, but it says, having had a spiritual experience or awakening as a result of these steps. It's a promise. It says, if you've done this work to this point, you've had a spiritual awakening. And that was my experience. And as Jill and I were talking about a little bit before this meeting, just going through this again, I can feel that my spiritual awakening is broadening. New things are coming up, new feelings are coming through. And, it's just a constant reward if you keep working through this. So with that, we're going to start reading the third part of step 11. So if you've got the book.
And Laurie, thank you. We'll go down to that page that started the third part.
If you got the paper copy, it's on page 112 and it starts at the bottom paragraph, the third part of this step. And I think you've got a couple more pages to go there.
Oh, she's got it. The third part where her little hand is.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can, because everybody see where Laura's pointing? Okay, and then Michelle, would you like to read that first? I'm going to be interrupting a lot tonight. We haven't got very many paragraphs to read, but feel free to take notes about this in your little red book or next to it, because there's some very interesting thoughts in here. So I'm going to be stopping a lot, so have a pen handy. Do you want to start us off, Michelle, with the third part?
Sure. The third part of this step relates to prayer for the power to carry out God's will. The prayer is for mental efficiency, for spiritual strength, and for physical endurance.
Okay, let's stop there. So we've broken step 11 into three parts, and now we're going to break the third part into three parts. We're going to pray for mental efficiency. That's number one. For spiritual strength, that's number two. And for physical endurance, that's the third thing. So I've written a 1, 2, 3 next to each of those. And now what we're going to do is expand on what that actually looks like. Go ahead, Michelle.
We must merit the power we seek by first improving our efficiency. Mental energy, spiritual strength, and physical endurance are not granted until we qualify for them. We may pray for them, and we should, but they cannot be earned by merely asking. They must be earned by honest endeavor.
Okay, so let's stop there. So this is talking about the first one. We're praying for mental efficiency. And that is, we're going to talk about now, how do we get that? I can't just, so this is something I'm learning about prayer. It's not just a wish list. I'm not just sitting here saying, okay, God, I want something. Now it's got to be followed by an honest effort. And how do I express that effort? Go ahead, Michelle.
Sorry.
The power is developed.
The power is developed as we surrender self-centeredness, and by prayer and meditation. We improve our conscious contact with God when we forgive and help others.
Okay, let's stop there. So there's a key point in there. And that key point to be highlighted is the last sentence of the first paragraph there. Maybe you can put it says, cannot be earned by merely asking. They must be earned by honest endeavor. So this is an action step. This isn't, in other steps, we've been asked to become willing to do something. In this step, we're asked to be active, to take a certain action. What are those actions? The paragraph she just read, there's 4 of them. Can you see them? The first action is prayer. The second action is meditation. The third action is forgiveness. And the fourth action is helping others. So the key idea, number 11, is easy does it, but do it. Okay, let's see. Susie, are you there, able to pick us up from "We cannot live others' lives"?
Yes, we cannot live others' lives, but we can help them help themselves. Our interest will urge them to renewed effort. As we aid their progress, we enrich our own resourcefulness. As we help them develop strength, we are unconsciously devising ways and means for gaining new power and understanding ourselves.
Okay, I call this the codependent paragraph. Okay, so we can't live another person's life. All right? They may be alcoholic, they may be an addict, they may suffer from other maladies, but we can't help them with that. What we can help them is to help themselves. So that's what we do in this program is we pass on the tools, we support and we guide, but you can't work, as my sponsor said to me once, you can't work the program harder for your sponsee than your sponsee is working. And Gary, you've said similar to me. I can't work the program for you. I can't do this homework for you. I can't get you to listen to the recordings. All I can do is put that information in front of you. I cannot help you unless you help yourself. So by doing these steps and going through this material, you are helping yourself. And it says, my interest is to urge. That's another action. I bug you guys about this stuff. Do your homework. And then it says, as we aid their progress, that's another action part on mine. And what we're doing in here, we're aiding you to get this. But at the end of the day, you're the one who has to put the paper down to the pen. You're the one who's got to make the time to listen to the recordings. And then what happens in this is what Gary's just talked about. We get a benefit by teaching this stuff. It says right there, I enrich my own resourcefulness. We threw Gary into this and had him on Zoom doing all this stuff and took him right out of his comfort zone and then said, let's just all do it with the Red Book. And he's having a spiritual experience because he's enriching his own resourcefulness. And what does that do? It helps us by doing it, but it helps you develop your own strength. And at the same time, we're unconsciously devising ways and means for gaining a new power and understanding of ourselves. So this is a three-part win. I win, you win, and my higher power and I get connected better. Everybody wins, but you got to do the work. Can't do the work for you. Okay, next paragraph.
It is not wise to pray for power selfishly or with resentment, envy, or self-pity in our hearts. God grants spiritual help freely to honest alcoholics who try to live the AA program. His help is limited only by reservations and half-hearted application. Members who faithfully live the 12 steps to the best of their ability should pray frequently. God will answer their unselfish prayer.
Oh boy, this is a really bossy paragraph. I like this. That's what I love about the Little Red Book. It just tells me what I got to do. And it's these are directions, okay? And the very first sentence is key point number 12. It is not wise, and otherwise don't do it. Others have tried to pray for power selfishly. You can't ask for power. It's saying that very directly. Or if you're praying and in your heart, ask yourself, here's another thing I've written in big letters on the side here. What's my motive for my prayer? Is it resentment? Am I praying because I'm really annoyed at you? And I'm praying for you with a sick man's prayer, but I don't really mean it. What I really mean is you just changed to suit me. Okay, you see the difference? Envy. Am I praying out of envy? Or self-pity? Poor me, I'm in this mess. Oh, dear God, fix my mess. That's a prayer of self-pity. That's not, God, help me to help myself so I can help other people. Do you guys see the difference? Can I get some nods? If you understand what I'm saying here, okay, good job, thank you. And then it says there's a big promise here. God is going to grant, and we know what we said about grants, spiritual help freely to honest. Gary, can you remind them what a grant is?
A grant is an exchange. You know, it's not a gift. It's not something that you just get. It is an exchange. I will give you this in exchange for you doing that, or you giving me this. So like a land grant is, I'll give you this land, but you have to promise to improve it. Like back in the days when they actually did land grants. And
it's a two-way commitment.
Yeah.
So
I'll give you these resources if you, like I'll give you money if you put this program together and administer it.
So it's going to say you got this exchange that's going to happen with your higher power. He's going to give you the strength you're looking for if you're an honest alcoholic who's trying to live the AA program. You're going to find the power. Because if you are living his will, this is the deal. You get this power. But again, it's by action. So that's key number 12. And so I've written at the bottom of this page, my HP will help me do it, but not without work on my part. It's the same concept as your sponsor doing the steps for you or doing your homework for you. It's not going to benefit you in the least if I do your homework, right? But I've already received the gift by making the homework for you and having to learn this stuff myself. I'm already ahead here. It's up to you guys now to work this part. It's an action step. And then it says we've got this honest living according to the AA program. So we're going to learn all this cool stuff that we've done in the last 12 steps. We're going to stay current, do our inventories, blah, 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 be angels. All right. But this is our goal. This is going to be our 2.0 version of ourselves. All right.
I want to add a quick statement there. Is that say, I'm sure everybody that's been around an AA meeting for a length of time has heard the phrase, it works if we work it, used quite a bit. But if you stop and think about it in the context of prayer, it applies there too. Prayers work if you work them. You may not understand how they work or what the results are, and that's part of what we'll talk about later. But you know, and like I've said before, sometimes when you pray, the answer is no, but that doesn't mean that negative. It means that we just don't understand how it's supposed to be delivered. So, prayers work if you work them, and that means just like it applies here. Where it says we're going to do, some things for other people, get out of our own head, do some service, align our spiritual behavior or actions, or align our actions in a spiritual way. And that's part of, supporting the prayer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's beautiful. Okay, the last paragraph here for you here, Susie, is the at times our thinking.
At times, our thinking becomes self centered. We try to force issues. We mistake our willfulness for divine will, and by sheer willpower, we accomplish certain objectives. The true source of such power soon becomes evident. We find ourselves out of harmony with other members. We lose that warm feeling of accomplishment. We lack proper inspiration. We are unappreciated and misunderstood. We do things that give us no pleasure and are not useful to others. When this occurs, we may be sure that the power we are generating has no connection with the power greater than ourselves.
Okay, so this is really, pardon the pun, a powerful paragraph. It's a lot like the part in the big book. You guys know about the director? When we take self-will back and we think we're the ones that is not only directing the show, but we're going to act in it and we're going to micromanage every little thing that's going on it. And at the end, what happens? The show doesn't go off. So this is a bit like this. The more I get back into Jill, the more Jill goes into the prayer, then the lines become fuzzy when I start asking for Jill. Because I'm going back into what do I want? What is it? What happens when we say that? We're playing God. The whole thing I'm asking for here is direction. I'm asking for GOD, good, orderly direction. And like Gary said, sometimes the answer is no. And we don't know at the time the answer is no, why that no is, but I know, and we're going to discuss this later as we go around the room, in retrospect, I now know I was told no for my own good, because other things in my life would not have happened that are very beautiful if I had not been told no. And when I was in self-will and asking for things, the other thing is we can ask for other people. I don't wish that person to die, or I wish that person would die. Again, that's not my prayer. That's not my prayer to ask for. That is out of my control. That's in my higher power's control. It's only for how am I going to do God's will? And so again, when we ask for God's will for us, for me, what's your will for me? Yes, I'm going to suit up, I'm going to show up. I've got this list of things that I think I'm going to accomplish or try do, but you know what? I've suited up and showed up. Now make a mess of my list. Because that's what my higher power does to me all the time. And now I've learned to stop fighting the fact my list has been changed and things aren't happening the way that I had orchestrated it. It's my higher power's will. And all I can, and this is really helpful to me because I'm dealing with some hard feelings of rejection from my family, for example. Or at the end of the day, I have to say, God, they're going to come into my life or not in your time. I'm not doing anything on my side of the street that warrants the rejection. So I've been able to come over that character defect of pushing my bully button and feeling like a victim. How cool is that? So that's where we're going here. Okay, let's see. We've got 2.5 more pages. So carry on with another paragraph.
It is safe to use this comparison as a yardstick to gauge the source and quality of our power.
Go
When we
ahead.
get no inspiration or happiness from our efforts, we certainly are not in harmony with God or those around about us. We should apply step 10 at once. Admitting our mistakes and praying for spiritual aid will be most helpful. Follow up with outright service to someone else. God releases power to those whose lives are channels for his will. This takes us out of the driver's seat and back into the AA program.
Wow. Okay, you guys, this is a super important key concept. Okay, it's that sentence at the bottom of that paragraph. God releases power to those whose lives are channels for his will. And right above that, it gives us really clear directions how we become better channels. Do you see that? What does it tell us to do? Apply step 10 at once. I love this book. Like, thank you. That's a direction I want. Yeah, okay. I'm not tuned in. The connection's fuzzy. I'm not getting an answer I want, or I'm not getting an answer as quickly as I want. What do I have to do? Pause, and I have to let it go and apply my step 10. I have to admit my mistakes, and I have to pray for spiritual aid. I have to pray, and then what do I do? An action step. I'm going to do outright service to someone else.
I also wanted to say on that note too, the beginning of that paragraph, it says, when we get no inspiration or happiness from our efforts, we are certainly not in harmony with God or those about us. And if you step back and just think about that for a second, what it's saying is, you're not in tune with your intuition. Something's telling you it's not right. And that's something that as your channel with your higher power opens up, that's where back in step 9, it talks about we'll intuitively know how to handle situations that baffle us. We know that we're in alignment with the spiritual way of life. And that part of that is, as you talked about earlier, is the practice, doing the next right thing, along a spiritual path keeps us in tune with, that spiritual alignment. It's action.
Okay, guys, that's a super important point because we were talking we were talking about trusting our instincts, right? So this is this alignment with our higher power. It's kind of like, how when I was doing this thing with my hands and I was saying, are you in a state of ease? Or are you feeling up here? I'm high. I want to be high. That's a state of being in dis-ease. And down here, that's when the depression that follows the state of being high, or just you end up being here because that's where you're out of sync. We can get back into a state of ease. And this is what Gary's talking about when we pray on it. But we have to, and this is what this little red book is telling us, but it's not the sort of Santa Claus prayer, which is bring me in January the answer to my misery. This is an active step. And the two ways we're going to do it is actively connecting with prayer and meditation and very clearly helping others. I love that, Gary, about the intuition. That's a really good point. Okay, so let's move on for readers. Amy's driving, so she's not allowed. Kimberly, have you got it? We all suffer? Oh, maybe Kimberly, I'm not sure if can you, oh, you there?
Yeah, I'm just listening tonight. Thanks.
Okay, super, no problem whatsoever.
I can
Okay,
read.
Laura, you
Our
want to pick it up
alcoholic
when we
addict.
all suffer?
We all suffer from spiritual apathy and misuse of our emotional energy. Perhaps we should restore spiritual balance by retaking step 5. Paradoxically, alcoholic emotions may either make or break us, it seems.
Okay, so that's another little, okay, when you're feeling real out of sorts and out of disconnection again, here's again, we're now at step 11. It's assuming we've done these other steps and we're not tuned in. Again, really clear directions. Perhaps we should restore spiritual balance by retaking step 5. Remember that we're only as sick as our secrets?
5.
Yeah. greeted with
Minutes
such
ago into ourselves
enthusiasm.
to human being, the exact nature of our realms.
Yeah. Okay.
Necessary that we learn their constructive use. There is a practical solution to our emotional problems, a procedure that responds to the intelligent application of facts that science has provided. Experience teaches us which part our emotional behavior has played in acquiring and maintaining our alcoholic condition. Feelings of hate, criticism, resentment, self-pity, jealousy, and intolerance prolonged and aggravated the insane behavior of our compulsion to drink.
Okay, so
Also
let's
drinking.
stop there for a second. So notice in that paragraph, there is a practical solution. Okay, we've got a solution to our emotional problems. In other words, drinking and not wanting to feel. And then it says there's a procedure. And what's that procedure? Those are the steps. And that's going to respond to intelligent application. Okay, so then we're moving on now. What it had a list of feelings of hate, criticism, resentment, self-pity. What are those, guys? Character defects. Thank you. Okay, from Psychology Teaches.
Psychology teaches us that emotions and feelings are sources of energy. Examples of this energy are found in fear, anger, sexual attraction, and love. Humans must have this emotional energy to function mentally and physically. Without it, it would be abnormal. Without the drive of emotional energy, we would be helpless, be-ridden creatures. We would lack the capacity to engage in the daily routine of living. We would not think or move about. We would be practically immobile. We would retain our reflexes and little else.
So just
That
pause
sounds
for a
funny.
second there, because I want you to pick up on this word energy, okay? Because remember how we said that we were breaking the third part of the third part of 11 into three parts, and we were talking about having this energy, this power source. So we're getting into that here. So notice that it says a right emotional energy, and it's we're now going to get into energy types, and it's also saying that notice the quotes there, emotions and feelings are sources of energy. So here's something little outside AA, but think about the circle of people that influence you most and what sort of energy they have. And I'm learning that I need some pretty high spiritual energy around me to feed my energy cup. And so the emotions and feelings are sources of energy. Then what does it talk about? It says sexual attraction and love. Those are normal, God-given desires. But fear and anger, those aren't. Those are character defects. So when we buy into negative energy, we're making a choice. So this is, again, how am I going to get my power and connection with my higher power? I've got to have my cup filled by you, and so I seek now actively, this is an action on my part, for spiritual energy from other people that are spiritual beings in human bodies. I'm attracted to that. And the higher I want to resonate, the higher I want to move into Jill 2.0, the more I need to be a seeker of teachers and of higher spiritual energy. Okay, let's carry on. As alcoholics. Oh, yeah, that's where we are, right? As alcoholics. We have overlooked the value.
Sorry, I just had to open the window.
Okay.
Okay, we have overlooked a greater source of energy that we are capable of generating, that of love. Human energy reaches its maximum and is, sorry.
Oh, hang on. I think I'm on as alcoholics. We've overlooked the value.
Okay.
Yeah.
As alcoholics, we have overlooked the value of harnessing the right emotional energy. We have used the energy of destructive, negative power at the expense of creative, positive power.
So just pause there. So again, we're talking about energy types, like I just explained. It's saying right there, we want the right emotional energy. So I have to, and this is, I've heard people say this is like battling Satan. And if I'm going to go and expose myself to a whole lot of negativity in my experience, when I'm doing 12-step work and I'm really getting down with some negative energy and some real Debbie Downers, and I have to go and seek another action, higher energy, spiritual energy. Now, what does that look like? It may be going to church. It may be, just like it says on pages 86 to 88, whether we belong to a particular religious group or not doesn't matter. But religious people are right because they know where to go to fill their spiritual cup. So whether I belong to a denomination or not, it says right on page 87 that you've got to go and seek the types of prayers and the types of things that practice the principles of the program for yourself. So make your own prayer. It doesn't have to be one handed down in this book or one handed down by a church. The prayer needs to resonate with you. Okay, and that's what and that again is attracting the maximum positive energy. Okay, let's carry on with obviously.
Obviously, we have instinctively used the drive from fear, sexual attraction, and anger. We have submitted our wills to these emotions, to the determinant of our spiritual well-being. We didn't realize we are unable to withstand the demands of such devastating energy.
Okay, that's a mouthful. It basically what it's saying here. It says when we submit our will to these negative emotions, to character defects, our spiritual well-being is going to decline. That's what it's saying, to the detriment of our spiritual well-being. In other words, you may have built yourself up to here by putting a lot in your, flexing your God muscle and putting a lot in your spiritual bank. But if you then take back self-will and get into anger and fear and your character defects, it's going to be at a cost. And what is that? It's a detriment to your spiritual well-being. What does that mean? I'm taking a step away, right? I'm taking a step backwards from my higher power. I'm stepping away from God. And then I'm letting myself connect with negative energy. Okay, and then now we're moving into, we have overlooked a greater source of energy. So we're comparing a super negative, or some people call it devil energy, satanic energy, call it negative energy. I just look at it and for simple terms, we got a higher power and we've got a lower power. And I recognize that both are calling me. And if you're early in the program with drink, or you're dealing with some sort of particular codependent or other thing that's really troubling you, I think the way I look at it and what really helped me in early sobriety is I have a devil, and I literally think of a cartoon devil sitting on my one shoulder and an angel on the other. And both of them want my attention. And I'm really used to looking at the devil because we've been having a really good time for a long time. And that's who I have a relationship with. But that relationship has just got me in so much trouble. My life is unmanageable and I'm really unhappy. So I come into AA and it teaches me about the angel on my shoulder and that I don't have to listen to alcohol calling me all the time because we know it's cunning, baffling, and powerful and patient. It has a contract on my ass and it can't wait to fill it. So it's always going to be sitting there. And it's the same thing with every one of these other things that is trying to take us away from our higher power, the dark power, the light power, whatever works for you. So visualize you've got these two things going on in your head. And if you're an alcoholic like me, I can be going along just fine. And all of a sudden that dark power is going to start telling me there's some other stuff I want to do again. And I don't. So that's where I need to stay close with prayer and meditation to building up my spiritual cup. Okay.
Along those notes, just before let's say, it really reminds me of I'm sure most of you probably heard the two wolves parable. And I just pulled it up in front of me here just for anybody who hasn't heard it. But it says, an old grandfather is teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside me, he said to the boy. It's a terrible fight, and it's between two wolves. One is evil, He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. He continued, the other one is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you and inside every other person too. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, which wolf will win? And the old grandfather simply replied, the one you feed.
Ha ha!
And that's exactly what we're talking about here is, aligning ourselves with the spiritual components of our life, feeding ourselves, as Jill just talked about, positive energy, right?
And
Yeah,
like
the-
Gary's saying, and what is feeding? It's an action. It's not just sitting there and waiting for someone to come and drip feed you. It's an action. It's what you seek out and what you let feed you. That's beautiful, Gary. Good job. I love that. Okay, we've got a couple more. We got two little paragraphs left before the summary.
We have overlooked a greater source of energy that we are capable of generating, that of love. Human energy reaches its maximum and is most constructive when the mind and body are activated by this positive emotion. It is reasonable to believe, therefore, that the power to carry out God's will must come from the inspiration and energy that are found in the emotion love. Love that embraces God and humankind. We serve and appreciate both.
Okay, so the human energy reaches its maximum. This is a statement of fact. And it's most constructive. What does that mean? It's what I can build with, what's positive. When my mind and my body, okay, this is talking about self-care of the body as well as the mind, activated by this positive emotion. And it's very much along the lines of positive begets positive. So it's a choice. You can tune into the negative and get pulled down. And that's hard sometimes. When I first started in this program, I had been clinically depressed, or I don't know how clinically. I think I was just on so many drugs. And alcohol is a depressant. They say that, but I'm taking antidepressants at the same time I'm drinking. There's a bit of a problem with that thinking. But I was never really honest with my doctors about how much I was drinking. I was able to quit antidepressants right after I stopped drinking because I wasn't making myself so depressed. But it took a while. I had to recalibrate and I had to feed my body good things. And I had to learn how to exercise all over again. I mean, I was literally having a physical therapist come in and move my body. That's how far down the scale I had gone. And that was the angel that came to me and introduced me to AA and said, my fiance is in the Whistler Mountain Group. And that's how I came to be in AA. So miracles do happen, but I do digress. Key point number 14 is the italics on this page, that the power to carry out God's will must come from the inspiration and energy. So two things, right? Inspiration, the desire for more, and the energy, that positive force that's found in the emotion love. Now, as corny as this sounds, love is the key. Love is the key. Love, though, is not just love, it's defined. Love of a certain type. It's a love that embraces God and humankind. Two things there, guys. Your higher power and everybody else, good and bad, that we see. We have to find the God in everybody. And I'm finding, and I've had some real challenges recently, where I'm looking at somebody that doesn't have a program, that's having a meltdown, and it hurts some things they're saying, and I love on them. It's a new way of doing it. And it's very, first of all, disarming in any situation. But I don't take on their negative power. If I don't buy into that negative talk and go into jealousy, guilt, or retribution, and resentment. If I don't let myself go there and I stay in my character assets, all I can tell you is I've been doing this consciously a lot. It's super empowering. And notice the word power, I use that consciously because we learned we were powerless over alcohol, but that doesn't mean I can't take back my own power as an individual as long as it's aligned with my higher power's will. And that's what Key 14 says. Even though I may not, and in quotes, feel love or gratitude at any given moment, I must remember that does not mean that it is there. And that's the hardest times to love. It's easy to love somebody that's being kind and sweet to you. It's not so easy to love somebody that's really stepping on your toes and pushing your buttons. And this is where I move into Jill 2.0 as a much higher spiritual being, is when I can actually get out of my head that wants to take me back to the negative emotions and stay in the positive emotions of forgiveness and patience and kindness and love. I win every time because I don't let myself go to that negative place. I don't listen to the devil, I listen to the angel. Okay, so the last paragraph here.
Before we
Oh,
move
go
on,
ahead, Gary.
I just wanted to say that for a practical application of this, you just have to kind of back into the program for a second and think about how much we talk about fellowship and what fellowship really means. We talk about the fellowship of this program, and it's not being friends with people. It means that we provide unconditional love. We help people. We love people until they can find a way to love themselves. But in terms of a spiritual way, we don't have to like person to provide guidance or provide this program to them. We've got a debt to pay this thing forward, and that's the unconditional love part. I don't necessarily need to like you, but I need to love you as a part of the human race and say, hey, you're deserving of every chance to be better than you are. And if I can help guide you along that way, then that's my responsibility. And that's part of what fellowship is all about. Yeah. And what quite
Thank God
often
for
what you
that.
find is when you participate in the fellowship, you end up making friends. There's a real difference between friendship and fellowship, and one might lead to the other.
And the crazy thing is, some of my best friends, and I love you guys, I can honestly say that. But if you'd asked me before coming into this program, if we all would have ended up in the same room sharing our innermost feelings, I would have laughed and laughed and laughed. So this is exercising our God muscle and allowing you beautiful people into my life. And I'm really grateful for that. And thank you, Gary. That is exactly what it is. And you see people get better in here. And then you find you do like them because you end up liking the sober version of themselves. And there's something really special with knowing that you help somebody get from that, sickly mess, if you're like me, that wandered into the rooms that was defiant and not very well at all in body, mind, or spirit, to grow into the people that we know we really are. And that's a cool thing to watch. That's one of the best parts of being in the program. So it says, in summary, we're on summarization now. If we scroll down a little bit here, and I'm just going to finish this bit here. It says, we set up a definite 24-hour discipline of our emotional conduct. Okay, that's an action, guys. We do this every 24 hours. We don't get to take a day off. We start each day with a morning quiet time praying for freedom from self-centeredness, fear, and dishonesty. That's why I like Meditate at 8. By going to that meeting and doing that at the beginning of the day, tick, I've done that one, thank you. Planning our day, we ask for knowledge of God's will. Well, we do that in there too, right? And then divine direction that we may make the right decisions. Our prayers should be unselfish and useful to others. So 86 to 88, reading that every morning in the group or by myself, looks after that part. This step recommends We relax. You know, it says we cease struggling, we relax and take it easy, and cease a foolish waste of energy. We also know in 86 to 88, it says that we don't burn up energy foolishly as we did when we were, you know, running around trying to solve all the problems that were really about ourselves. And then it says we can establish a daily period for reading the big book, reading spiritual literature, clearing our minds of wrong motives, and learning to live and let live. Well, if you go back and listen to our first recording, there's a number of the mottos in there. But the other thing that really jumps out at me, again, that my favorite word, motives. Motives, motives, motives. Wrong motives. Every time, and is my prayer with a wrong motive? Or is my motive of God's will? Okay? And then it says each night, so this is how we end our day. And we went through this when we were going through our step 10 stuff. So go back to the step 10 recordings. I just did. Oh my gosh, the 3 sheets that are included in those materials, you do them for a week and you tick the boxes. And then you compare the next week and you score yourself on 1 to 4 how you're doing with your character assets and your character defects. I had one really bad week. And it was really good to see the trend of where I was going. And so I was honest with myself. Do the homework. Those sheets, they're only just paper, or they're only PDFs on a computer until you do the work. Okay, that's what it's reminding us to do in this paragraph. And then it gives us it's bossy again. I love this bossy little red book. Each night we inventory our activities of that day. So we have the sheets. That's what I'm talking about. And go back in the materials. There's 3 killers there. And they gave me character assets I didn't even know I had, and a couple more defects. Anyway, we admit the wrong we've done. Well, it's educating me that I can do wrongs in places I didn't know, and I'm also doing some good stuff I didn't know I was doing. Then I ask God's forgiveness. You know, I own it, right? I own it. And then I say, okay, whoopsie, yeah, I'm going to fix that one, but can you let me off? And then I say, how do I make it better? That's what an amends is. Remember, it's not just going and saying sorry. It's making sure we've cleaned up our side of the street and making it right for the other person. And then I love this bit. More bossy directions. Close your day with a prayer of appreciation. Yeah, let's end with gratitude, not only for everything else, but for our divine help, for our help from our higher power. And it starts right back in with it said what the very first will that God was for us, that we remain sober. And so that's it for his help and our sobriety. And again, it refers at the bottom of the book to page 85 and 88. That's why I'm saying we're real clever by going to meditate at 8, because we tick all these boxes every morning. It's great. I don't have to do it again. But I do have to do the night one, and you've got the sheets. So that's it for me being bossy on the 3 parts of the 3 parts of the 3 parts. And now what we're going to do is go around the room and have a conversation of our experiences here. So Gary, back to you.
Well, before we do that, one of the things that I wanted to say was, I love the step 9 promises. And one of the things that I really love about it is it starts off, one of the things it talks about is that our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. And what we've talking about tonight is how we maintain that, like doing these prayers and focusing on the positive starts to help us rewire our thinking to one that is just based on positive thinking. Like I talk about how I came in here and my whole life was based on fears. A lot of them were unjustified or unhealthy fears, but that was what drove me. It got me into the rooms. But over time, by working through these steps, my whole foundation became one of gratitude. Just really grateful for everything that I've got in my life. The people I've got, the things that have changed in my life. And a lot of stuff hasn't changed on the outside, but everything about the way I look at life, has changed on the inside. And there's a phrase that I really like, and I added it to the homework for this week as something to contemplate. And it just, it says, all things we are truly searching for become a reality. Contented sobriety, serenity, and happiness. You know, those are the things that really matter. You know, like if I stop worrying about the physical things, you know, what I have and I don't have as far as possessions and that, if I look at, you know, my attitude and outlook on life, if they're based on contented sobriety, serenity, and happiness, you know, everything else starts to fall into place. And that's the result of being spiritually aligned. And everything we talked about tonight is helping reinforce that premise, you know, helping us work on our spiritual alignment. And the other, you know, thing you've probably heard around the rooms that resonates and is part of this too is that, you know, what Jill was emphasizing tonight. It says faith without works is dead. You know, we can have faith, but if we don't act with action, you know, if we don't apply that, it really is meaningless. And that's where getting involved in service, or, you know, become naturally wanting to help other people, whether they're in the program or not, is really important. There's somebody, you know, we read the responsibility pledge in our meeting every night. And the way the responsibility pledge was written in the beginning, before it was changed for the final version, it says, I am responsible when anyone, anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA always to be there, and for that I'm responsible. It doesn't say anything about just helping alcoholics. You know, it says anyone, anywhere. And I love that idea where, you know, this program helps us expand our thinking and our concern for humanity. You know, it's not just helping people in the program, it's helping anyone, anywhere. And yeah, so I just wanted to point that out. And
I
yeah,
think that's just the last little thing is you guys remember these sheets. Okay, they're in the materials. And just want to throw just a couple things out there so it gets you recording it every day, your inventory sheet, and you do it every day and do it for a month. And there's some ones here. There's only like a dozen of them listed, but they're pretty in your face, like procrastination, laziness. And then I have to do promptness and positive activity. I like a lot of this is about I can't be dishonest on anything. And just really take a look at the sheet, and then my daily inventory, and it's got assets and liabilities, and it has 31 days in it for you to monitor where you're at. Am I in an asset or am I in a liability? And you can kind of start to chart yourself, and you start to realize, you know, I'm a really negative thinking person, or I'm like I'm always in the negative thinking, or I'm not. What is the opposite? Positive thinking. Then there's one here I really like: vulgar, immoral, trashy thinking. You know, am I there, or am I in high-minded, spiritual, clean thinking? Anyway, some food for thought, and again, more work. So let's open it up to the floor with your journeys with step 11, where you guys are at with it, or what you got out of this meeting, anything that resonated with you. We haven't been able to round table for a bit.
I also wanted to say I'm really enjoying watching Laura and sister be of service there to the little one.
Absolutely. We can do service and practice these principles in all our affairs. Okay, who wants to start us off? Susie, you're looking keen.
Well,
Thank you.
I can't get my screen to go to where I see all the boxes. You know,
Oh yeah,
that's
can we
just
take that, Laura? Can we stop screen sharing now? Thank you. Now we go. Has that helped?
pinch out for a bigger view. I don't know. It's a skill. It's a my issue with technology. It's a technology issue. But I wanted to do it where I saw all the screen, see everybody, but I'm not seeing everybody. Anyway, it back to what your question was, talking about, I'm sorry that if you hear something in the background, I may need to mute and change locations real quick. So I better not be
Okay, we'll
first.
come
I'm going to
back to you.
mute.
We're going to come right
Yeah.
back to you, Susie. All right, Michelle, come on in. Hi, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, you were just talking about these, like the sheets. I have, the last couple of days I've been feeling pneumonia, so I wanted to start at the first of the month and really get into it. And so I made myself a smaller little binder for like beside my bed. So I've been like doing the nightly going into my bedroom, and instead of turning a TV on right away, I do my work first, and then I can watch a little TV. And I usually I've been doing my work, and then I have a prayer, and then I watch TV, and then I find myself I have to say a little prayer again just as I'm going to sleep. But I'm finding it really difficulty filling in the sheets, especially the one with all the little boxes, the grid. It's just like, I don't know, there's so many things like, it says, okay, for instance,
You don't have to have all of them.
well, that's just the thing. The problem is some of the things I have both, like dishonest and honest. Well, like sometimes
Okay,
during the
so
day,
I
there's
can
been a
answer
couple
that
little
for
things that
you.
I'm not honest
On
about,
your
and then other
main
times-
sheet, which is this is the summary of the weekly sheet. Okay? And you are scoring yourself excellent 4, 3 good, 2 average, 1 fair, 0 poor. Okay, so go back to this
I was
sheet.
talking about the grid, Jill. I see that all, and I've done
This
those.
grid is the summary of this one.
Right.
So you take your scores from this one. Isn't that right, Gary? That's how I did it.
Well, some people use the big grid one as like a 31-day sheet, so you can do like a month. But you're just doing a week at a time. You do it the way Jill's laid out. But the real point is that you don't have to use all of them. Like you just choose the ones that are the character defects that you're concerned about, or that come up most of the time in your life. I don't have the sheets in front of me, but
And what they're saying, sorry.
if you're finding yourself some days you're honest in some situations and dishonest in others, and even if it's like the little white lie thing, then you've just got to have evaluate your thinking. Like, is it a habit that you just use little white lies, or is there a need for it? Because I hear people in the rooms all the time, they talk about it. Well, I find myself doing it even when I know I don't need to. It's like, it's just a bad habit that I picked up along the way. And if that's the case, then that's something you track and you say, hey, I want to get rid of that. Does that kind of fit in with what you're saying, or?
I think the sheets, Michelle, that the ones that where you go a 1 to 4 are, because I get what you're saying. You're not 100% feeling your one thing or the other, right? And that's why I like the step set, the worksheet that's on page 61. It's giving you 5 choices of where you're at. Yeah, stick on that one. Good. I'm glad you're doing the work. All right, Susie, are you in a place where you can chat now?
Yes. Sorry. Had to move
Come on
locations.
in.
And I'm sorry I missed a little bit of that. I ended up having to log off and log back in, so I missed a little bit. But so I think I might not be exactly on the same topic that you guys were just on.
Doesn't
But
matter.
thanks. But one of the things that in step 11 that I really was impacted was, and my sponsor shared with me, was a two-way prayer. And that I learned a lot about, and I'm learning, but what I wanted to share was that I wanted to learn how to be honest, pure, unselfish, and loving. And those 4 categories really hit home for me. And in all circumstances, trying to think, am I responding with honesty, purity, unselfishness, and lovingly? And that just really impacted me in this context. And anyway, so and then I have then because of my personal, the way I handle things, I have scripture to back up those things. which, that was just very helpful for me because I turn to scripture when I have a need. And so anyway, I thought those were, and something happened and I was upset about something and I stopped myself and said, wait, are you being honest, pure, unselfish, or loving, or any, or all, or none? Good thing to think through. So
Mm.
anyway, that's just something I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. That's why I keep saying the motives, right? Because I can find so easily when I'm getting into that sort of question that I start going back into what do I need rather than what is my higher power's will for me. And one of the others on the sheets that really got me was frozen feelings. And that was a real tough one for me to take a look at. And approval seeking, caretaking. Like these were all ones I hadn't looked at before. Yeah, and it's funny how when you're going through the steps, I think Gary, you've got this experience too. We've talked about it, is sometimes the book, I always find the steps meet me just like the big book does when I study it, where I'm at in my program. And every time I do this, my connection to my higher power is stronger. I feel like I'm moving into a different place. I'm becoming more the woman I want to be, or the spiritual being I want to be. So the book and the steps are meeting me at a different place, and I'm hearing what I need to hear at this particular time to elevate my thinking. Does that make sense, Gary?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
The other
everyone
thing,
understand that?
the other thing I was going to say about it is, you know, this concentration on prayer and meditation, and the idea of doing it every day, can seem arduous at some points. You might be sitting there going like, "Oh, this sounds like more work," but just like Jill was just saying, it turns out, in hindsight, when I look back now, this has definitely become the easier, softer way. This is what fuels my life, in a very positive way. And, you know, I used to spend a lot of psychic energy in my drinking days, just trying to keep the facade up. These days, I can just be who I want to be. I don't have to, what you see is what you get. I don't have to spend any kind of psychic energy trying to, convince you of anything else. And, you know, being comfortable with the fact that I don't know everything. In fact, the more I do in this program, the more I know I don't know. And that's okay. It's a lifelong process, and it just gives me comfort.
Absolutely. I like that. I like that expansion. Amy, are you there? Would you like to come in and share?
I am Amy Alcoholic. If
You
we're just
plan anything before
reflecting,
we went to avoiding any road rage today? I'm here.
I'm just sleepy. Um, if like in reflection to what we're talking about right now, I'm glad you put the 11th step 11 back up on the screen because I never thought of step 11 in the three, like putting into chunks. People read step 11 every single meeting, like that's the beginning of like every single meeting. And I never thought of it as like three parts, like period.
Yeah,
Period.
me
Like I can't
neither.
quote it right now because I'm driving, but
Yeah.
like I never thought about it like that, as in, and then I like the other part that you were saying about it goes prayer, meditation, forgiveness, and service. And then what
Yep.
was your fifth one you said right at the end of this meeting just a second ago? I said it to myself a couple times and now I can't remember what that last little piece was. You said prayer, meditation,
A
service,
prayer of appreciation for his help and our
gratitude.
sobriety. Yeah.
Gratitude. So I was trying to
Yep.
say them to myself: prayer, meditation, forgiveness, service, and gratitude. I liked that, like thinking about it in that uh sequence, or just remembering all those bullet points, I guess. Kind of makes me think of like the outline of a chapter. Like I just think about, I don't know, for some reason that's touching me as an easy way to remember, just to pray, meditate, forgiveness. That's a big one because that's where I'm struggling, I think. Service and then gratitude. Like that's just really touching me for some reason. And I like the part in this third section about power. And I've never, I mean, if you think about that power, they talk about that a lot. Even like when you break down the triangle, they'll break it into those three pieces: emotional, physical, and spiritual, right? Or mental, sorry, mental, physical, and spiritual. And so this little red book is bringing that up again. You know, I've heard a couple people, I don't know, everywhere share like nothing I say is original, right? And I feel that way when I think of this. Like I've heard people talk about the three sides, right? Physical, mental, and spiritual. And here we're seeing it in the red book that was written in 1946. You know, it's on the triangle. It's all these different. So I like the consistency of the messages too.
Yeah, me too.
Right? It's consistent messages over and over again. If I can just pause and listen, I get a consistent message. Okay, physical, mental, and spiritual. That's how the triangle is. That's how you've got fellowship, you've got the steps, and you've got your relationship with your higher power. Like there's that sequence again. So it helps me remember it in other places, you know, to practice it in all of my affairs, because then I can bring back up these little sequences again. That's what's touching me right now.
Oh, you really listened.
It's keeping me awake. I was falling asleep. I don't know why. Shouldn't be tired like that. But anyways, thank you.
Yeah, you should be, because my first conversation was with you at 7:30 this morning. And you were working
I think it
out.
was 6:30.
Or
I was
6:30,
sleeping in
yeah.
my car.
Oh, crazy. Laura, you look occupied.
I think they're chasing.
Did you want to come in, sweetheart?
I have a crying baby here, so probably not.
Oh,
Well, glad you were here, and thank you for your service of sharing the screens and such.
I just wanted to point out one thing too. You know, Susan was talking about it earlier. You know, having something else to rely on, and you know, every once in a while, I hear people that are fairly new in the program come in and says, "Oh yeah, you know, like I've heard that in my church too," or you know, my church says this too. And for some reason, some people think that you know what they're doing in church came from AA. You know, and it's all the other way around. You know, this program shamelessly borrows from whatever works. You know, and you know, you look at all of these prayers, like take the St. Francis of Assisi prayer. You know, it's a fantastic prayer, or the Serenity Prayer. You know, these are things that work. You know, it doesn't have to be any denomination. It's just the words behind it carry meaning. You know, and for me, even when I first started, it was that fake it till you make it thing. Just say them. You know, just but consciously think about the words behind what you're saying. And for me, it started to change the way my thinking worked. You know, it started to rewire my brain, rewire my thinking. And you know, they talk about this program as spiritual brainwashing, and I love that idea. You know, because when I came in, I know my brain needed a thorough cleaning, and every once in a while, I need to have that reinforced. You know, do another scrub to get it, and kind of what we're talking about. You know, you got to clean the channels and make sure that the connection's strong. So I can't take things for granted. I've got to stay connected.
And on that note, you know, one of the things that really jumped out at me is the very first word of step 11. I have to be a seeker. It's it. The very first word is I sought. And that's an action. And I really found this profoundly educational, the way this is broken into three parts. And I have to say, I went to a place just even preparing for this. I felt like I was consciously making a connection with my higher power, just even trying to do this and figure it out, because it was just, okay, seek, you know, sit quietly. I didn't get something, sit quietly with it, think about it. And that's down to me. if I really want to understand this to the point of being able to teach it to somebody else, I have to take a really deep dive into this. So thank you all for taking me to a deeper place with my program, because I know being involved in this step group, hope you guys are getting this, but I'm having a blast. So
Stayed sober another day.
it's all of us, we all did it. Good job. So that takes us to the end of this session. We can just open it up for fellowship if anybody's got any questions or anything they want to add. Good to see you, Johnny Mac. Yeah, we were just talking about step 11 and we've recorded it and it'll be on the and the recordings for the first two parts of step 11 are up on the website. So I'm told that these are, Gary, I've been told these are the best recordings we've done. So let's hope somebody's listening.
Yeah, you guys are doing an amazing job. Thank you so much. I can't wait to take some time and to review them more in depth. And so I was a little bit, I had a friend that came over from my community with her baby. So that was a real gift to hang out with
That
her.
was lovely. Absolutely
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah,
Did you want
beautiful
to add
baby.
anything in now, Laura, or is she still?
Yeah, I'm just really getting out of this learning, the three-part series of this. Just, how to not make it complicated, right? And not to be praying selfishly. Like just, I guess I kind of had it right. I just always memorize the step 3 prayer, and that kind of covers my base with everything. So it's nice to know how to pray responsibly and the way that we should. So, and I really loved learning about the different energies and yeah, like the highs and the lows, because we all get them. I get them. I can be irritable and I can still have those thoughts of, wishing that I could use, but I just play the tape forward and I don't do it. So, and I pray and it gets that out of my thinking.
I really like the guidance on that one, which is, like, at least what I read into it was that if I want to be able to give to you, I've got to fill my cup up. And Gary, you've mentioned that to me so many times. We're here to help others, but at the same time, I have to make sure I'm in fit spiritual condition to do that. So I need to get fed. And so I go to the energy sources that resonate with me, that fill my cup. And it's interesting how the people that are in my life have changed so dramatically, because I can intuitively feel really negative energy now. And I almost like put up a shield subconsciously so I don't take on that negative energy. And I think that's a little bit of self-preservation too, especially if you start, I found doing 12-step work's tough. Because like Gary was saying, I don't always find myself in a situation initially where I like the person and they're lying to me. And they don't smell very good, and they may be throwing up every 2 minutes, and they're phoning me up inebriated, and I'm like, okay, God, what's your will for me on this one? But those have been turned out to be some of my most magical relationships. And then I also got, what was good for me about these have been to see a really good look at what I looked like. Because I don't know about you guys, I had no self-awareness of just how awful I was appearing to other people. Now I'm seeing other people come into my life for help that are in pretty much the same state I came into the rooms in. But anyway, I think that was hopefully clear, and that's a wrap on step 11, right, Gary?
Yeah. I just wanted to close with, I read it already, but I just wanted to read this out again because for some reason, this really resonated with me today when I read it earlier. It says, because it's like a promise, it says, all things we are truly searching for become a reality, content and sobriety, serenity and happiness. For me, what more can I really ask for?